Um,
Recording has started.
Welcome to Lab 22, question 1A. Basically, just find the difference for each. So the bottom 20% is 0.8%, top 80% is 99.2%, bottom 40% is 4.9%, top 60% is 95.1%, bottom 60% is 4.4%, the top 40% is 85.6%, bottom 80% is 31.3%, the top 20% is 68.7%. So given this data, the bottom 60% of taxpayers pay less than 25% of federal taxes, and the top 80% of taxpayers pay over 98% of federal taxes. Question 2, since corporate tax is about 9.9% of federal revenue, and federal revenue is about 15% of GDP, then 0.099 times 0.15 equals 0.0149, which would be about 1% of the GDP.
For question 3, we are asked to calculate or complete the table with the values according to the taxation system in Rabushka. And we do this by subtracting $10,000 from the initial income, and that the remainder will be taxable income. And the tax due would be 20% of the taxable income at a marginal tax rate of 20%. And finally, the average income tax would be the tax due as a percentage of the original income. Using this method, we are able to fill in the table as such. For part B, it asks if the marginal tax rate will ever be lower than the average tax rate. And according to the data in the table, that is false. It will never be lower than the marginal tax rate will never be lower than the average tax rate. For part C, it asks a similar question. If a worker's income rises past $1 million, will the average tax rate ever be greater than 20%? That is also false. No, the average tax rate will never be greater than 20%. And finally, for part D, it asks if an accountant is making $50,000 per year, what percentage of her income goes to the Lord High Mayor? That would be 16%. For question 4, it asks whether most of the federal government transfers of cash go to the elderly or the poor, and that would be for part A, and the answer is that most of them go to the elderly. And for part B, it asks whether most of the federal government purchases of healthcare go to either the elderly or the poor, and again, the answer would be that most of them go to the elderly. Question 5, it asks, in the following cases, which of the two benefit more from Social Security? In the case of women or men, it is unclear. Part B, in the case of married couples or singles, it is married couples. Part C, in the case of people born in 1910 as opposed to people born in 1965, it would be people born in 1910. And finally, for Part D, in the case of high-income earners or low-income earners, it would be low-income earners.
For question 6, it asks to evaluate whether these are true or false. For part 1, this is false. In reality, it's only about 10% or even less. For part 2, about half of it goes to Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, so this is true. For part 3, if about half goes to Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, and about 9% goes to interest on debt, then yes, over half the federal budget goes to all 4 of those. And then for part 4, the defense spending is about $600 billion, and then you divide it by the total population of the U.S., and you get around this number, so this is true. For question 7, the one that won't be exploding as much is Medicaid, because the other two are elderly programs, and the elderly population is going to increase dramatically in the next few decades. And then for part B, the category that's predicted to actually decline is unemployment insurance.
For question 8A, the labor is supplied by the workers and labor is demanded by the firm, so the workers supply labor while the firms demand labor. For part B, the equilibrium wage and the quantity of labor are both shown at the on the slide as the points on the wage axis and the quantity of workers axis. For part C, if an increase in the payroll tax is introduced, there will be a reduction in the demand for workers from typical firms. That means that typical firms reduces demand for workers, as shown on the graph in the slide as well. For part D, as shown in the graph that was in the slide in the previous slide, there will be a reduction in the take-home wages of the workers as the demand for said labor will reduce from the side of the firms. And then for part E, the new supply curve would be inelastic as the workers would be indifferent to a wage reduction or a wage increase. Therefore, the wages will be lower than what it would have been in the case of a more elastic supply curve. But then the number of workers, that is, the quantity of labor employed, will remain the same. And then for question 9, we were asked to show the national deficit as well as the national debt in this particular country as over the years, and this is shown as the highlighted red values on the table. So this has been our Lab 22. Thank you, and we appreciate you for listening.